Hello, everyone, and welcome to the new episode of Entrepreneurship Lab. This is your host, Nevena Bajalac, welcoming you once again to the podcast where we help you grow and scale your business. So, today we have a special guest, very special experience, special topic. His name is Doug Lynam, and Doug is coming to us from New Mexico, United States. And he has very interesting story that he want to share with us. He is helping people in finances, but in the past, he was actually a monk, and he is an author of two incredible books that are called From Monk to Money Manager and Timing Your Money Monster. So today, we're going to learn a lot about mindset about money, managing money. So get ready. So welcome to the show, Doug, and thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thanks, Nevin. It's such an honor to meet you.
So I first have to go straight to the point, like monk. Like I never had someone on the podcast who is entrepreneur, who's been a monk. So I want to hear that kind of background, that story, because that must be super interesting.
Yeah, and I've started a lot of businesses along the way. Some of them failed, some of them succeeded, and I'll tell you a little bit about it. But so I'll try to give you the Cliff Note version. It's quite a long story, but basically, I grew up in the United States, outside Chicago, in a relatively affluent family. Um, But when I was about seven, my parents divorced, and then money became the tool that they used to get back at each other. So in my household became very weaponized. And so I thought money was the problem. It turns out it was just my parents' attitudes towards money that was the problem. And so I sort of demonized wealth. I thought this was the, St. Paul says in the Bible, the love of money is the root of all evil. And I took that a little too seriously. Uh, Actually, when you dig into the Greek is much more nuanced than the English translation, but that's another conversation. And so my brothers and I, all my brothers, we all rebelled against our parents in different ways. But I eventually, went to a school called St. John's College here in Santa Fe, New Mexico. It's called the Great Book School. It's a very rigorous liberal arts education, and loved that. But then was looking for a little more adventure, and so I went and joined the Marine Corps. I went to officer candidate school with the U.S. Marines, and I graduated top of my class. But then I had a bit of a spiritual awakening, and I realized that unresolved anger issues and high explosives were a very bad combination. And so maybe I shouldn't be going around blowing people up around the world just to project my anger issues out on unsuspecting civilians around the globe. And and I had some reservations about the American political system, about how prudently our military was being used, and a bunch of other concerns. And so eventually I declined my commission. I think I'm one of the few people who's graduated from officer candidate school and then just turned their commission down. But then I went and made a pivot and became a Benedictine monk, which I did for 20 years. And I thought that would be a great way to really escape the world of money and materialism forever, to take about poverty. And it was also a great way to really flabbergast my parents. It was another way to kind of stick it to them, and instead of an act of rebellion, really. And I didn't join the monastery. I wasn't raised in any particular faith. There wasn't a lot of structure in my home, and so I didn't go there. I kind of went there looking for the meaning of life, looking for some sort of faith or what's this game of life really all about? And I figured, where is a better place to sort those questions out than in a monastery? And I thought it was only going to be a couple year I thought it was just an experiment, try it for a couple of years, and then kind of like grad school, and then do something else. But kind of got pulled in, and enjoyed the life in many ways. Again, and being there 20 years, but in an ironic twist of fate, about 3 years after I got there, the community went bankrupt. So I guess we all took the vow of poverty a little too seriously. And it turns out if you live in a community where everybody hates money and hates dealing with money, that just leads to all kinds of problems. And so we were all what I call money avoidant. We were all avoiding this issue. No one wanted to take responsibility for it. No one wanted to take the blame for it. And it wasn't about blame, but it was about, who's really going to solve this issue. And I realized that the bar was so low, I couldn't do a worse job than what was done before me. So even though I knew nothing about, so the irony is my mom was a certified financial planner, and my dad was a CEO of a company, of a chemical company. So money was pretty relatively abundant in my family, but talking about money was more taboo than talking about sex. Like, it was easier to have the sex talk than it was to have the money talk, which we never ever had. And so, anyway, and by the way, my brothers all took vows of poverty in very different ways. I have a twin brother. He went and became a homesteader in upstate Vermont. And I have an older brother who went off and joined a grunge band up in Seattle that was moderately successful. But basically, we were all basically couldn't trying to find very different ways to kind of again rebel against our parents. Um, so fast forward a little bit, the community I was in, it was a teaching order, so all the monks we were I was the head of the mathematics department at a private school. And after I sorted out the financial issues in the monastery, I decided that it was really a bad idea for kids to be going out into the world financially illiterate like I was. So I started teaching econ and personal finance, and also helping monastery guests with their financial struggles, which were abundant. And then one day for a class project, I opened up because I always like to give the kids practical examples, real world, hands-on projects. And so I thought, well, let's teach them about retirement by looking at the school retirement plan. And I opened it up, and it was an absolute train wreck. Like everything that you don't, I'll use some big financial terms here, but there's a thing called fiduciary duty, which I'm sure many of your listeners are familiar with. There was no fiduciary oversight. The fees were high. The fund performance was poor. Blah blah blah. Going down the list. And so I then looked for a company that I thought could do a better job, and I couldn't find one. And so it turned out that this was an endemic problem across the United States, that teacher retirement plans in public and private schools across the country were an absolute mess. And I don't think an exaggeration to say that the teachers of America are getting financially raped by their retirement plans. It's just like they're just cash cows for these companies. And they don't really I don't I don't want to pick on any one company in particular, but in general, I find them very predatory. So I thought about it, and as someone who was a budding entrepreneur who wanted to, I was looking for kind of the next chapter of my life, and I thought, well, what's my competitive advantage in this marketplace? Okay, well, I know schools really well, I know finance now really well, and I've got this monk thing behind me. So could I? And then we've got this multi-billion dollar problem. So then I did something absolutely insane, which was to launch my own investment advisory firm from inside a monastery, and I actually I got started getting clients, and it was remarkable. But I realized pretty quickly. So I started my company around 2015. I left the monastery late 2016, and almost immediately it was like, okay, I'm in way over my head. Like I know the finance side of things, but what I didn't know was the regulatory compliance side of this industry. And there's a lot of things that just kind of so technically difficult. So I merged my tiny little startup with a larger firm here in Santa Fe called Longview Asset Management, which is a socially responsible B Corp. And eventually became partner and was co-managing over $250 million in assets, and had a really good run with that. And then I had a couple other projects that failed along the way, but that one was successful. And then eventually I took a buyout last year to finish this book because I couldn't be working 60 hours in the office and writing 60 hours a week. So I got this. Oh, I should back up. Here's the, just for entrepreneurs out there. Sometimes you just don't know. You take these big risks and you don't know how they're going to play out. But if you find your niche, here's sort of this miracle that happened for me. Is right when I launched my company, um, the New York Times did a six-piece expose on the problem of teacher retirement plans across the country. And so every month they had this long article about what was going wrong. And so I reached out to a guy named Ron Lieber, who's the financial columnist for the New York Times, and said, "Hey, I love these articles. These are on Facebook." I reached out on Facebook. I don't know. I didn't know him. Didn't know from Adam, and said, "Love what you guys are doing, and here's what I'm doing to try to solve that problem." And they got excited, sent a reporter out. Ron Lieber flew out to Santa Fe. We spent a day hanging out, and then he did a big full page piece on me that was on the front page of the business section of the New York Times, and that went viral. And then I got a book deal from HarperCollins, a six-figure book contract from HarperCollins, which was like winning the literary lottery. Like who would have I didn't plan to be a writer. That wasn't my ever in the cards. But I got this book deal with no social media platform, with no experience, nothing published. I just had this cool story, and I sent them a sample check. Anyway, some agents reached out from New York. This really prestigious literary firm called Folio Lit, which I highly recommend for anyone looking for literary agents. And they reached out and said, "Do you want to do a book deal?" I said, "Sure." And they got me this contract almost immediately. So that was one of those just, oh my gosh, that really put things in motion for me in a way that really made things so much easier than if I had, you know, but you couldn't have seen that coming. Who would have guessed that something like that would happen? Anyway, let me just wrap it up and say I've got these two books. The first one's called From Monk to Money Manager, a
Yeah.
former monk's financial guide to becoming a little bit wealthy and why that's okay. And that's a really good primer for people who want to know the how-tos of managing their money. Like what's the basics of earning, saving, investing, insurance, all the little things that I didn't know, that I wish I had known going out into the world about money, and from an ethical perspective, trying to do it from a place of love and compassion, and using money as a force for good in the world. And now my new book is called Taming Your Money Monster: Nine Paths to Money Mastery with the Enneagram. And some of your readers may be familiar with that, but it's a really helpful tool for entrepreneurs because what it does is it tells you how your ego structure is from. It's great for, this is another book I want to write, is how you can use the Enneagram. I'm using it to with a focus through money, and what are the money struggles, and how your personality shapes the way you can have some unhealthy relationships to money. But it doesn't just apply to you, it applies to your clients, it applies to your colleagues, it applies to your coworkers, your boss, or your employees. And it really can help you better understand how to navigate team situations more effectively. And I found it a very helpful tool for sales. And here's why. And we probably don't have time to explain it in too much depth, but here's the punchline. In the Enneagram, it sounds like a big fancy word. It's really simple. So Ennea means nine in Greek, and gramma means drawn. So it's nine things drawn together is what Enneagram means. But it's these nine archetypal patterns of personality that we've teased out over the millennia. And one of the things I'm really proud of in this book is I've really taken it a little bit out of the woo-woo space and grounded it in childhood developmental psychology as well as neurobiology. So we've got some real, this is a system with real legs to it, and it's a very robust system. But if you know your Enneagram type, and once you know the Enneagram, you can kind of pick up what people's types are pretty quickly. And what it tells you at its most fundamental level is, what is your greatest unconscious fear? And that unconscious fear, which was shaped in your childhood, I could explain why, but essentially it's the thing that formed your personality has many components to it, right? This doesn't explain everything about your personality. So your personality has a nature component, which is your DNA, and that's your gene expression, and that's one thing. And then you have a nurture portion of your personality, how you were raised. And the Enneagram helps explain a significant portion of the nurture part of your personality. And so it explains what we all have this. Anyway, I have to get a little more technical here to explain the why, but essentially, if you know your clients or your prospects greatest, if you know their enemy, but you know what their fear really is, so you know how to talk to them and pitch whatever you're selling or whatever you're marketing, to help meet that, go a couple levels deeper beyond the product, beyond the services and things. What is this person really emotionally looking for from life in general, but also, potentially from your product or service? And if you know that, you can really find very quickly how to talk to someone in a way that's going to really put their mind at ease, and build trust and rapport very quickly. And then really how to pitch your talk, just tweak whatever your pitch is, to that person in a way that will make that sales process infinitely easier.
I mean, what a story. I don't even know where to start. I have so many
Mhm.
questions, but I absolutely love it. I think we should go about talk about Enneagram a little bit more. And yes, and I love how the story came in the full circle. Like you were
Mhm.
running away with money and you ended up advising and actually helping people. Because mindset is such a huge part, and we're not gonna go into topic of families and traumas we have and everything that's happened. But I see that I know that through my experience. I see through so many of my clients and people in general that how, our connection with money is actually formed when we're children, and things we experience, and all these beliefs we are having, which are sometimes like so silly that you have to call yourself like, where is this belief coming from, right? So
Right.
I mean, what an interesting story, really. We could spend hours talking so much more, but I would love to ask you a little bit more. How does Enneagram actually reveals blind spots? You already mentioned some things. That what does it show? And then how does, like, when we reveal some wounds that we have, how is that impacting our money habits?
Sure. So we don't have time to go through the whole Enneagram, but let me
Yeah,
explain just my type and then
yeah,
give you a little teaser how this works. Okay.
yeah.
So it works like this. So um, imagine when you were born, right? You pop out into the world and you have a physical umbilical cord that gets cut, but you immediately develop a psychological umbilical cord that connects you to your caregivers. There's a sort of egoic codependency that you have on your caregivers that allows them to do most of the driving for you in the early years of life, from 0 to say 7 to 10, where it's really fundamental to have that parental connection. But that psychological umbilical cord has to be cut in order for you to, what we call it, to individuate and differentiate both from your parents, your siblings, and the rest of reality. And so that psychological umbilical cord has to be cut by negative emotions, because positive emotions would reinforce your connection to your caregiver. And basically most of these negatives come through the nose we get, like, don't touch the hot stove, don't kick the dog, don't bite your sister, those sorts of things. So that inevitably creates a negative emotion in a child. That's why they cry and scream and stuff like that. But you have to do this, right? But there's only three. So we know from the work of there's an affective neuroscientist by the name of Jaak Panksepp, who did some groundbreaking studies several decades ago, with mostly working with mice and rats. But he found that in all mammals, there's three core. Well, there's actually seven core emotions in the limbic region of the brain: three positive, three negative, and one that's kind of in the middle. But the three negative emotions that cut the psychological umbilical cord are going to be either anger, sadness, which is sometimes conceived, could also be shame. It's sort of like grief or sorrow around your identity. So that's what the sadness really is about. And then there's fear. So anger, sadness, and fear are the three. We call these the tri. If you think of this, if you have a color wheel, right, and that's the Enneagram, and you break it into nine slices, there's going to be three quadrants or three sections. So there's three anger types, there's three sadness types, and there's three fear types. Because that pain has to be, there's only so you got hit by one of those negative emotions more than the others, and you either internalize that pain, which is kind of like giving yourself an emotional wedgie. You can externalize the pain, which is like having a food fight with the world, or you can have both, and that's why there's nine types. So I'm in the sadness triad. I'm a type 3, which is often called the achiever. I give them kind of car names. I think it's a little playful and helpful for people, but I call 3 the race car, because we're always racing towards goals and trying to achieve things in the world, but we tend to leave our authentic selves in the dust. Because what happens is for threes, we had our psychological umbilical cord cut by internalized sadness, which means we feel a certain sadness or grief about how we perceive ourselves. And we have an externalized sadness, which is sort of a shame or grief around how we think other people perceive us. And then what that does for a 3 is it creates your greatest unconscious fear, which is being worthless. So there's this, and threes are sort of this black hole of a void kind of in the solar plexus for me, is what it feels like when I tap into it. It's like this sense of not enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy. I have no value in the world. So to overcome that, what threes do is they try to win validation and connection by achieving things. So for example, if I run a marathon and I come in first place, you have to applaud me. I'm forcing you to validate me. Or if I start a company and make a lot of money, or if I get the A plus on the test, whatever it is. And so that unconscious fear of being worthless really drives the 3, and it's trying to protect us from that fear of being worthless. But the problem is that often we become such people pleasers along the way. We're so busy trying to win that validation that we're always threes are like really good mask changers. Like we're always shifting our persona to put our best foot forward to impress whoever we're in front of. Okay, so now how does this apply to money? Now, here's the thing. So I've layered on top of the Enneagram what I call the attachment theory of money, which is based on the attachment theory of relationships. If anyone's familiar with that, that's a pretty popular system. But and I've just taken that and just tweaked it a tiny, tiny bit and applied it to money. And basically, what it says is that you can have two unhealthy ways you can relate to money. One is where you're anxiously attached to it, where you're maybe too obsessed about it. Think of Ebenezer Scrooge or Gordon Geckos, from the movie Wall Street. These people who are hyper obsessed about money, much to the detriment of themselves and the world around them. Or you can be money avoidant, which is like me. So that's my type. Is I want to push money away. Like that's why I went to the monastery. I didn't want to deal with it. I still hate doing my bills. I still hate doing my taxes. I do it, and I get it done, but it's still never easy for me. And so those are the money that creates these money monsters. But there's another caveat I got to put on this, which is it isn't. Most of us aren't all one type, anxious or avoidant. Most of us are jumbled. And because there's what I call the four pillars of finance. So for me, the four pillars of finance are going to be earning, saving, investing, and giving. So earning, saving, investing, and giving. Those are the four pillars. So you might be, for example, an anxious earner who makes a lot of money, but you might be an avoidant saver because you spend everything on stuff. So if even if you have a high income, I saw this all. This was my dad actually. My dad and I are both threes. He was an anxious three, and I was avoidant three. So the the anxious three, I call them the blinger because they tend to want, because we have this inner sense of worthlessness. What threes will sometimes do if they're money anxious is uh, we often equate our net worth with our self worth. And so what what threes will do sometimes do is one way to win to earn status in society is to have a lot of status symbols. So
Yeah,
threes can
makes
often get
sense.
hyper focused on the fancy watch, the nice car,
Yeah.
the big house, and they might overspend, even though they're making a ton of money. It's all going on this bling, right, to impress the world. And so my dad, even though he made a lot, when he retired, did not have a very robust retirement because he spent it all along the way. So he was an anxious earner but an avoidant saver. Or you could be, say, an anxious investor. You might have a really robust portfolio, but you're an avoidant giver. You never use your money for what it's supposed to be there for, which, in my opinion, is for love and service to a suffering world. Like you're not giving back and using this wealth for something productive for others. So that's a quick overview. Maybe I'll just stop there. Oh, I forgot. So the anxious three, I call them the blinger, and then the avoidant three, I call them the barrier, meaning money triggers so much shame or sadness or grief inside of us that we tend to be like an ostrich who will just stick their head in the sand and not want to look at it. And so that was me for most of my life. And I'm not completely cured of that, but I'm better, I'm so much better than I used to be. It's not about perfection, it's about progress.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, it's a progress and we cut ourselves in our own beliefs and always there is a next level also if we want with money or like you said there's investing, there is saving and we're like why am I like this? So I think this is such a great to find out more about, all your beliefs and habits and engrams. So can listeners find this in your book, right? More information about
Absolutely.
this? Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
Amazing. So everyone, please go and get Doug's books. And this is really, really interesting information. And I think the more we learn, it is the better. So yes, what would you say? We have only a couple of minutes left, but what would you say for the end of the episode? When, I mean, sometimes we know we have some kind of blockages or we have limiting beliefs about money. Where would you just start? Like advice for someone listening, and they're like, okay, so where should I start? Right? I don't have to go to
Well,
monastery for 20 years to be a monk, or
right,
like, what do you
right.
think will work maybe for most majority of people? Like, where they should start to maybe start changing those limiting beliefs?
Well, I mean, I've got these. I would start by buying the book, Taming Your Money Monster. And if you like it, please, folks, post reviews on Amazon or Goodreads. That would be a huge help for anybody who gets into this stuff. But essentially, what you need to do is first you need to find out what your Enneagram type is, and the book will help you with that. And if I also have there's a quiz test on my website at douglynam.com if anybody wants to try that. That'll tell you your type. And then the book will tell you what your money monsters are. What specifically are what those you need to learn what the unhealthy patterns are that are unconsciously driving some of your unhelpful financial behaviors. And then if anyone beyond that, if anyone wants coaching, you can go to my website, and I'm happy to coach you through some of this stuff.
Yes, I love it because there's so many people out there wondering and having limiting beliefs and feeling money is the struggle. And sometimes, of course, it's easier for us to even observe in other people, but we don't know where to start with ourselves. So I invite everyone to go and get Doug's book. This is such a valuable information. Unfortunately, we are not having more time, but this was such an interesting story. And I have to invite you, I'm going to invite you to be a guest again so we can dig deeper for
Please.
sure. I love it. So thank you, Doug, for being here today.
Thank you so much. It was a great conversation. Really, really a pleasure.
Yes, and I invite everyone once again, connect with Doug, reach out, go to his website, get the books from Amazon, learn more about your, traumas, limiting beliefs about money. And the book is a great way to start and help yourself. And as always, please make sure to subscribe, share this episode with at least another person you know is going to benefit from it, and keep on learning. And thank you for listening and thank you for being here. I will see you in the next episode.